Well, and we want to get into some other issues having to do with healthcare, but I want to get to Homeland Security now, because this is an issue where you really were there at the birth of, for better or for worse, perhaps from your point of view, of this new agency.
No, see, I voted against the
I know you did,
okay.
but you were still involved in
Yeah,
the discussion.
Yeah.
And you were a very early and vocal critic of this whole agency. But you were in the position to address the problem. Congress wanted to do something about Homeland Security. And before we get to DHS, let's talk about TSA. That's the Transportation Security Administration or agency. How well do you think Congress did in trying to cope with the clear vulnerabilities that existed in our airport screening system?
Well, we've spent billions of dollars, and I think it would be fair to say that the likelihood of somebody hijacking a plane and flying it into the World Trade Center today are significantly less than they were before TSA was created. But it should be with all the money we've spent. There are still lots of vulnerabilities in air traffic safety in relationship to terrorism, but it's much likely that the plane could be used as a weapon, which made 9/11 so devastating. On the other one hand, one has to say on TSA, everyone was told it was going to be paid for by the fees. It's not. It's cost, I think, well over $2 billion a year in addition to the fees. So it's cost much more than anybody was told in this place.
And has Congress, in your view, done as well as it can do in overseeing this agency and suggesting corrective action where needed?
I think over TSA fairly well, but we still have major technology problems, particularly in being able to detect explosives, which is very difficult.
And why were you such a strong opponent of the Department of Homeland Security?
I just didn't think that you could possibly put 22 agencies together with no thought, no planning, throw them together and expect them to be a smooth functioning organization.
And your verdict now?
Well, I made the choice 4 years ago. I was ranking Democrat on transportation, and we reshuffled and created the new subcommittee. So I guess my good government instincts got the better of me. I decided, well, I'll try and go there and see if I can help prove myself wrong. And after 4 years, I haven't proven myself wrong yet. I don't have, Hal Rogers has been chairman of our subcommittee on appropriations. I think he's done an outstanding job in chairing it. Lots of oversight, lots of things because of our subcommittee's involvement, I think, put pressure on that agency to do things better. On the other hand, and sometimes I get upset with folks there that they aren't doing things right, but then I figure, why in the world would they ever take the job? You know, I think it's still in many ways an impossible task. And
what's impossible about it? Because there is an agency now, and it's been on its feet for...
Yeah, and it's getting a little better, but, you know, I suppose the best example was FEMA. FEMA was an independent agency doing well. You know, Katrina speaks for itself. It changed from a very lean agency that clearly had the ear of the president and major cabinet posts into a very ineffective group in response to Katrina. FEMA as it existed before 9/11 was much better than the FEMA we saw during Katrina. And I think that clearly was because of the reorganization. The Coast Guard's there. Fortunately, they haven't screwed them up yet.
Of course, the primary function of the Department of Homeland Security, presumably, is to make us safer. Let's just talk about that for a second. There are many aspects of making us safer. People worried aloud at the time of its creation about bioterror, food safety, transporting hazardous materials, chemical plants, ports, trains. Are we safer?
To some degree. But there, in any country like ours that's big, free, freewheeling, you're always going to have vulnerabilities. If there's somebody who wants to kill themselves to create dilemmas. You know, Israel's been trying to deal with bombers for decades and still having problems. So we always have those vulnerabilities. But we have to try and do things that minimize it. But we also have to do things that make us prepared to deal with emergencies. But it then has to be multi-purpose. It may be terrorism, but at the same time we have explosions that occur for other reasons. We have the hurricanes, we have the floods, and we have, you know, all of those. You know, we're worrying about pandemic flus. You know, the mechanisms in place to respond to that is not much different than what you would need to respond to a biological attack in some fashion. So it needs to be multi-purpose.
Have you found that just in the way that it operates, it's being constantly pulled by what might be called parochial interests? In other words, this region wants more money than that region and feels it needs it, or somebody here wants more money for first responders and another one here thinks what you need is better infrastructure, those kinds of questions.
Yeah, but that's part of the beauty of this country. It's diverse. I happen not to be, you know, there was all kinds of criticism that some of this money was going on a population basis to the states. The minimum guarantee was maybe too high, but you know, the conventional wisdom was that there were these wise people in the department could figure out precisely on a needs basis how much we could give to all those 50 states. I have never found those people. But, you know, with my excuse to the folks in New York, they were leading the argument for that. The 9/11 Commission was supposedly had divine judgment. They were, you know, I asked them, who are these people over there who know how to do this on a needs basis? Well, I'm still waiting. You know, and so there are times, this country's diverse, you got to get money out to the states, make them have some thoughtful plans on how to spend it. But, you know, I'll use my own community as an example. We have significant communication between our public safety folks, but it started in the 1990s. The local plans were in place. And the cooperation between fire and police and all happened and was worked out. And so in my community, the police can communicate with the fire, with the state patrol, and the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office. It's in place, but lots of work. You know, but if we're going to only fund interoperability, we do what the federal government so often does, is punish those who've already done something well.
Good point.
You know, I've often thought that what happens at the federal level is all good deeds go punished at the federal level if the states and local communities have done something.
So what I want to do now, and just go ahead and raise your hands, whoever wants to ask a question, and we'll start with you. And if you wouldn't mind identifying yourself, please.
Amit Kumar from the School of Public Affairs at AU. I've sort of concentrated on homeland security issues as part of my doctoral dissertation. What is your view in terms of Congress's role in mandating public-private partnerships? Should the government play a role, set standards for the private sector, or should the private sector define its own standards?
It's got to be a combination of both. We've got to, I suppose ideally I'd like to see a system where we ask the private sector to develop the plans themselves, and then we pass some judgment on whether they're really comprehensive.
And in terms of risk analysis, there's been a lot made, and I guess Linda mentioned this in terms of allocating resources based on risk assessments. What should be one uniform way of making risk assessments?
I don't think you can do it on there's any one way to do it. Frankly, some of the most important work for Homeland Security is the intelligence work we do. And lots of that's not even in the Department of Homeland Security. Most of it isn't. That relates to what the CIA is doing, or the intelligence community outside of this country, what the FBI and other law enforcement people are doing in this country. That, I assume, is done on a risk-based basis. When we allocate some funds for ports, I assume there's some judgment on where the most important place for those funds are to go. So you could go through a sort of a categorical programs that say that they are risk-based. Where I started having some problems is the distribution from the federal government to state and local government. We distributed supposedly on risk-based to local, a limited number of metropolitan areas. My own experience in my community is we've gone to zero, way up here, way down here. I can't, and going through long meetings, never figured out a good analysis of what that risk adjustment was. And then we had the grant going to the states. And I thought the department really had no great capacity to make significant judgments in the needs of varying states in this country. I would have preferred to see us keep it on population. Maybe the minimum guarantee was too high. But I don't think they have that capacity, and the reality is the type of risk you deal with around the country varies, and I thought there was equity there.
In terms of a criticism that the 9/11 Commission has made regards the jurisdiction of DHS being answerable to 82 committees and subcommittees across the House and the Senate, what can Congress do to change that?
Well, we created, in appropriations, we created one subcommittee for dealing with DHS. And I think that's worked well. I can't speak for all the other committees that are involved. There is a new authorizing committee that has significant jurisdiction, but there's some others, I think they're going to have to deal with the diversity of Congress.